Okay, just waiting for the YouTube live to show up on YouTube. Bear with me for just a couple of seconds. Here we go. All right, how's it going, everybody? My name is Jason Alba, and I am doing a series on how to create or how to improve your professional development skills, your soft skills, and things like that. And this is all based on my Pluralsight courses. Actually, I think that's not right to say. So what I'm doing is commentary based on what I've done with my Pluralsight courses. I have over 30 courses in the library. But I'm not sure that it's based on the courses. I put this course, the Designing a Killer Job Search Strategy, together. I put this together probably 2013, but I started Jibber in 2006. So a lot of what came out of this course was years in the making, right? It was my own experiences of being a job seeker, and which weren't good. And then, once I started getting on the speaking circuit and traveling around to different job clubs and universities, talking at alumni functions and stuff like that, talking with people in the job search, my own Jibber users, I learned a lot. And what I love to do is learn from experts. I love to learn from people who have really cool things to say, and systems and processes and pitfalls and advice and all that stuff, and take a lot of these ideas and put them into what I think makes sense. Because not every expert system is going to work for everybody, right? There's a lot of exceptions. So as I've traveled around the country and talked to a lot of people, I have and had a lot of experiences. I've just put together a lot of different ideas on what a successful job search could be. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Also, remember, it's April 9th of 2020, and Pluralsight is offering their entire library for free, which is crazy. So for the entire month. So you still have over 20 days that you can go watch anything and everything. You can become a SQL expert or an Angular developer or a UX person or a designer or whatever. You're not going to become that in 20 days, but you can certainly get in a lot of awesome training and learning from Pluralsight. So go to pluralsight.com or go to my blog, which is jibberjobber.com/blog. And one of the most recent posts has links on where to go to get the right form to sign up for the free month of April. Tomorrow, we will be talking about onboarding. And so today it's how to do a job search. And tomorrow it is what do you do after you get your job? And HR and managers should onboard you, but the purpose of that call is to have you onboard yourself. And what can you do to onboard yourself? And so that's what we're going to be talking about tomorrow. As I went through this course this morning, so I know a lot of people that follow me are programmers and developers and whatnot. And I remember back in the day when I was a developer, I would write something, and when I was done, I was done. I didn't want to come back and do anything with it. I was moving on to other projects. And if I ever had to go back and look at something that I did 6 months or 12 months or more previous to that, it was really painful, right? It was, you go into your old code and you're like, oh my gosh, why did I do it that way? Why did I write that? My formatting was weird, or I didn't understand this function or that tool or whatever. And that's kind of how I've always been. I don't like looking at, like in school, I never liked looking at my notes. Actually, when I took notes in classes, I couldn't read them. later because it was like, I've already done this. And so anyways, going through my older courses has been a fun exercise because I really thought, I wasn't sure how good they would be. But as I was going through this course this morning, and the course is about an hour and a half long, the thought that kept jumping out to me is, this is beefy. Like, there's a lot of stuff that I packed into this hour and a half. The course is called Designing a Killer Job Search Strategy, and it's on Pluralsight. And so we're going to walk through a few of those things today. I'm going to tell a little bit about my story and how I started out, which I tell from stage. I say it was a failed job search. So I got laid off from a general manager position of a software company, a really tiny company. And it was Friday the 13th that I drove away for the very last time. I got laid off on the Monday, and they asked me to stay for the whole week. And so Friday the 13th, I drive away, and I didn't have the stresses of the company finances or customer issues or product issues or worrying about people on my team. Like, all of that stress was gone, and it was awesome. It really was a beautiful thing. But all of that stress was replaced with, how am I going to pay my bills? Like, am I going to lose a car? Am I going to have to move? And, how long will I be able to pay my bills? And it was very scary. So I remember a particular part of that drive where I got off the highway on an off ramp, and it went up instead of down. It went up and then back over the highway. So I'm sitting up there getting ready to go over the highway. And I remember all the feelings. It was like I was on one emotional roller coaster all at once. I was super excited for what was coming up. I was really glad and stress-free of not having to worry about my company, but I was terrified of what was coming up. And luckily, I thought I was pretty hot stuff. Like, I had my MBA and I had some really cool job titles, and I thought I'd done some great stuff. And the economy was awesome. It was in 2006. It was before the 2008 mess. And so things were going to go really well. And so what happened was I started my job search. I wasn't really quite sure how to do a job search. You just, when it's not something you necessarily learn in school and nobody really tells you how to do it, it's kind of like, oh, you have to do that thing over there. Well, okay, well, good luck with that. And then when you're done, you get to enter society again. And I didn't really understand any of that. So, I didn't go and buy a newspaper. That's good. I went online and I looked on the job boards to see what was out there. And I thought, I'm not going to network. I don't have time to network. I'm too busy doing this stuff. And once recruiters and hiring managers see my resume and see how great I am, I'm going to get picked up pretty quickly. And I would send my resume out to a few of my network contacts on email and ask them, what they thought about it. And every response I got back was, man, you're awesome. You've had a great career. You have a lot of stuff on your resume. A company would be lucky to pick you up. And this is really awesome. Like, congratulations on whatever your next job is. And they're going to be really lucky. So anyways, that is absolutely not how it went. I remember spending hours and hours staring at my screen in fear, really, because I was getting no responses. I'd apply to jobs that were perfect for me. Like, they were a perfect match. And I wouldn't even hear back a thing. And I thought there's got to be something broken, because I'm perfect for this. Like, if I were looking at somebody and I saw this resume come through, I would for sure want to at least get on the phone or have a communication with this person, and nothing happened. And it was super, super frustrating. So I sat down one day and I said, okay, something is wrong. Something is broken in what I'm doing. I don't understand the job search process. So I'm going to read some articles and research and try and figure out what the process looks like, and then figure out where I'm making a mistake and what are the things that I need to do to improve. Well, long story short, I ended up becoming a businessman, an entrepreneur, because I found out that everybody was saying, make sure you organize your job search and make sure you follow up with people and you know who you're talking to. And, if a recruiter calls you and you're like, who are you? Then that's kind of off-putting, like, hey, you applied for this job at such and such company, and you're like, wait, I don't even remember that. Hold on while I go through my notes. So there was this idea that we as job seekers have to really know everything that's going on, even though there is a ton of information coming in at us. There's, new network contacts, and I met this person, I talked to this person, here's what we talked about, here's the follow-up, here's a job that I found, here's a company, and I used a job search spreadsheet that I made on Excel, and I'm pretty sure it was Excel. It might have been a shared document. I don't remember back in 2006 what we had, but anyways, on the spreadsheet, I had this column which was next action, which was basically when I needed to do something next for the contact company or job. And I remember one day, it was I think it was a Friday morning, and I was looking through my little database, my spreadsheet, and I saw on the next action column that the day before, I was actually supposed to call a hiring manager. I had an appointment. He was willing to talk with me, which sounds kind of normal, but for me, it wasn't. This was like one of the only hiring managers that actually agreed to talk to me. And it was really quite a big deal. And I saw my appointment that I missed the day after on my spreadsheet. And I was so frustrated. And I thought, we need something, job seekers need something more than a spreadsheet, something that can ping us, something that can tell us and prompt us when we need to or should reach out or follow up or something like that. So that became my passion, and that became what I switched over from this job search where I was getting no traction to creating Jibber Jobber. And the funny thing is, I became kind of the job search guy or the job search expert. And I blogged a lot daily, even on holidays and weekends. Early on, I would blog about job search stuff. And people in my network knew me as a job search expert. And I was like, well, the reality is, I can talk about this stuff, but I actually couldn't get a job. I'm no good at getting jobs. And when I got laid off a couple years ago from another software company, I thought, okay, I am much better at getting laid off than I am actually at finding a job. So anyways, I say that in jest because I've learned a ton about job search, but man, there's just something different about when you actually have to apply it to yourself. All right, one other really quick thing is just last year, I came up with this idea, which is now called the Job Search Program. And we're going to go into Jibber Jobber and the Job Search Program. I'm going to show you what some of those things look like as tools. And these are all things that just came up as I was learning and absorbing and figuring out systems and processes and what works and where you should spend your time and stuff like that. So let's jump back over to the course. I'm going to share a screen here real quick. This is the summary slide of my course. And if you're a current Pluralsight user, you'll notice that this slide does not look like the current summary slides. This is what it looked like back in 2012 or 2013. But the interesting thing is this module was, the first module was 40 minutes long, and it was kind of the foundations of what a job search is. And like I said earlier, I was really surprised at how beefy this course was. There was, when I went to bed last night, woke up this morning, I was thinking, all right, what am I going to talk about? I hope there's enough meaty stuff that we could talk about with job search. And then I go through this and I'm like, holy cow, there was a lot of stuff. And so just in the first module, and I have on my notes here, this is just my notes from the first module. I have another page for the second and third modules, but I really set a foundation of what a job search is, but more like who this is for and what it looks like and stuff like that. And so I'll just walk through a few of those things. Let me see real quick in this list here on your screen. When you should be in job search mode, always. I've actually seen this worse since starting Jibber Jobber than before, but I was working at my company as a general manager, and I wouldn't go to networking events and I wouldn't do anything like that because I felt like I'd be cheating on my company and cheating on my team. As general manager or as a boss or supervisor or leader or whatever, you're trying to motivate your team and you're trying to get them excited about being there and bringing their best to the company, and hopefully they don't leave or something like that. And what I found was later on was that I would not have been cheating on my company, and I would not have been cheating on my team, because any networking I would have done as a general manager would have been good for our company. But what I found out was when I got laid off with zero network and zero brand, that I was cheating on myself, and I was cheating on my family, and I was cheating on my future. And so I am a huge proponent, man. If you're in a job that you love at a company that's awesome, good for you. And that's awesome. And bring your best to work every day. But please don't neglect your own career, because if you end up like I did with years of neglecting, I started a job search from a negative. I didn't even start from zero or square one. I started negative. I had to spend a lot of time figuring some of this stuff out, as opposed to if I were to have had a network that I could have reached out to on the first day and said, hey guys, here's what happened, and here's what I'm looking for. And if anybody knows anybody at these 3 target companies or whatever, like I took a long time to get to a place where I was doing anything effective in my job search, because I never thought of myself as a job seeker when I was a general manager of a software company. And I know it's kind of lame to have to feel like, we have to have a plan B kind of at our fingertips and ready, but this is more true now than it was back in 2006 when I got let go. Like things nowadays, and I'm not even talking about COVID-19, where, I just on my website or on my news site, it says 16.8 million people filed for unemployment recently, I think like within the last week. Like that's ridiculous. I'm not talking about the pandemic unemployment issues right now today. I'm just talking about in 2019 and 2020, people are changing jobs regularly, and your boss might change a job. I lost my last job at my dream company in my dream role because my boss left. He didn't get pushed out. He chose to leave, but that kind of set off the domino effect of me not being, if you will, protected anymore and kept there in a role. That was perfect for me. So in the course, I actually talk about the statistic that I got from a coach for CFOs, right? So CFOs careers. And she told me that the average tenure of a CFO is, guess how long? How long do you think a CFO stays in one job at one employer? The average tenure of a CFO at this time, this was a few years ago, was 12 months. 12 months. Can you imagine? You're an executive, you're CFO, you're making an easy 6 figures. You might be making mid 6 figures. Like you're making crazy good money. You're very powerful, very influential in the organization. And you have to think that within the next 12 months, you're going to be out on the street looking? That's ridiculous. That's just crazy. If you combine that with the idea, I don't have any evidence to back this up, but this is just something that I heard. If you combine that, you'll be out on the street after 12 months every time you land a job, with the idea that it takes 1 month for every $10,000 that you earn, right? So let's say you make $100,000. It should take 10 months to find a $100,000 job. Now, I don't fully agree with that. Somebody came up with that and it sounds good, and that's what a lot of people say. But let's go back to the CFO example. I'm going to work for 12 months, and then I got to take another 10 or 12 months of looking for a job. And then I'm going to work for 12 months. It's like 1 year on, 1 year off. This is ridiculous. We don't need to do that. One of the things that I want to do with all of my messages through Pluralsight courses and Jibber Jobber and the job search program, which internally we called it Project Hope, one of the things I want to do is make your next job search and the next job search less painful than this job search. And this all comes down to, what are we doing with our career management, which is what we talked about yesterday. And how are we doing a very strategic and purposeful job search? So you're not spinning wheels like I was. All right. So I talk about Enron in the course, and I don't know, I kind of forgot about Enron. I've talked about it over the years quite a bit. Talk about from on stage, and the whole idea behind Enron is, let's say you're working at an amazing, awesome, multi-billion, super successful company in a great, solid industry, and a few people at the top of the organization made some decisions and did some things, and now nobody has a job, right? I think it was tens of thousands of employees. It was over 10,000 employees, if I remember correctly. Those are just employees, okay? So what I do in my mind is I multiply that out. I say, okay, let's say that every employee had a couple of kids and a spouse, and so now take 10,000 employees times 4. Those decisions from those leaders at Enron impacted 40,000 people, 10,000 households. And then you multiply it out more because we're talking about all of the subcontractors that dealt with Enron and all of the peripheral businesses that dealt with Enron and relied on Enron for their business that are now shutting down, right? This has nothing to do with how great of an employee you are. If you're in sales and you're making $1 million a year and you're bringing in a ton of money for the company, somebody at the very top of the organization can make horrible or unethical decisions, and now you're out of a job. Right. And so when I talk about career management and job search, I'm not talking to the people who are slackers and losers and they deserve to lose their job. I'm talking about the way the world is now and why we're transitioning, according to the federal government, every 2 to 4 years. Right. So Enron was a long time ago. How about WeWork from just, I guess it was last year? This massive organization where the owner was going to walk away with over $1 billion package just to walk away from the mess he left. And all of his employees, actually, I don't know about all, I think they kept some, but a lot of people got laid off, not because of anything they did or didn't do. It wasn't because they were smart or dumb or whatever. It was just circumstance. And of course, here we are in April of 2020, and I think we're in week 3 in the United States of quarantine. Man, what is it? 16.8 million people filed for unemployment. And that doesn't count all the people that haven't filed. And it doesn't count on, stay-at-home entrepreneurs like myself, who the government doesn't know what to do with us. Like, try to become an entrepreneur and go get a loan for a house or a car or something, or unemployment or something like that. They don't know how to treat you. They don't know how to handle you. So there's that 16.8 million who successfully were able to apply. And then I'm sure there was a ton of other people who weren't able to apply. These are factors that are outside of our control. So what proactively can we do about it? In the introduction, which is 5.5 minutes long to the course, I wrote down, intro, some honest talk about job security. And then in parentheses, I put scare tactics, because I kind of go into my introduction. I was watching, I was like, wow, this is actually kind of scary, how we really need to pay attention to all this stuff. So anyways, I don't like using scare tactics generally, but I wrote down that that's what I was doing. All right, so some notes on module 1. When should you be looking for a job? Always. One of my friends, Ash, he used to live here, and we would go to dinner. And last time I saw him, we had lunch, and it was cool. He moved to the East Coast working for a hotel, big hotel chain. And I remember he had an amazing job when I knew him. He was always very employable, super cool guy, very talented. And we were at a dinner or lunch one day, and he said, yeah, I get Indeed or Monster emails every day. And I'm like, what do you mean? He said, I signed up, and I said, here's the job titles I'm interested in, and I get those in my email every day. And I was like, really? Are you looking for a job? And he said, oh no, I'm not looking for a job at all. He said, but I want to know what's out there. I want to know what's going on. Like, this was his way of keeping a pulse, kind of a little bit on the economy, although he wasn't like an economist or anything like that. But it was a good way for him to see where the demand was, who was hiring, what roles were being hired for. And these were all roles that were relevant to him because he put in specific job titles and specific companies. But I thought it was really intriguing that somebody like him, who seemed like he would never be out of work, highly employable, was really keeping a pulse on what the job market looked like because, as he said, you never know. You never know. And like I said, it's better to start ready to go than at zero or at a deficit. All right. So in the first module, I talk about the idea of CEO of Me Inc. And I kind of want to pound into you that you really need to take care of you because nobody else is. Nobody else is. Your spouse might care quite a bit about it. But aside from that, man, your boss, no, don't count on your boss for anything about your own job security or career management. HR, the executives at the company who really think they like you, they seem to like you a lot. You're a business decision. I'm telling you right now, whether they like you or not, you are one step away from driving away having been a business decision. You know what I mean? You have to be CEO of Me Incorporated because nobody else is going to be CEO of Me Incorporated. And then I guess I went into scare tactic mode a little bit more because I thought, you know what? There's CEO of Me Incorporated, but there are other functions. There are other C-level functions that need to be handled. So CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, who is doing marketing for yourself? Like, what are you doing for your marketing? And Chief Security Officer and Chief Finance Officer, like, are you managing your finances well? Do you know what your runway is and how long you could last if you're unemployed, and you know what resources you might be able to buy, or where you can get funding, which might be family or friends or whatever, if you need to buy a suit for an interview or something like that. And so I listed CEO and 8 other CXO roles. And I was like, oh, when I was looking at that slide, I was overwhelmed. I was like, I don't want to have to do all of these things, but I'll tell you what, here I am, 14 years after I got laid off, and I have done all of those functions. You know who's going to do it for me? Nobody is. So I have to, I have an accountant and stuff like that. I have people, but I manage the accountant. Like, I found them and I determine whether they're doing a good job, et cetera, et cetera. I want you to be serious about being the CXO of Me Incorporated. I talk about being able to define the role that you want. This is a problem that I've seen over the years as I've gone on stage, and people, I'll ask people, what are they looking for? What kind of job are you looking for? And I hear people like, anything. And I'm like, well, I don't even know what that means. You want to go work? You want to flip burgers for $8 an hour? You want to be in an executive office? Do you want to be, where do you want to be? I'll do anything. And these are people that are maybe a little more desperate. They sound like they're versatile. Like, that's their message, is I can do anything. I'll get my hands dirty over here. I can solve problems. I can meet with customers. I can do presentations. I can create content. I can do all these different things. And honestly, as a hiring manager, I'm looking at that and I'm like, nah, you can't really do anything. It's like jack of all trades is not a beneficial way to market yourself, I think. In some situations, yes, you need to have a lot of skills. But I found that there is significant power in defining, this is really scary for a lot of people, defining your niche. What is your specialty? And what I found, and I got this, I heard this message a lot from professional speakers, because speakers will be like, oh, I can talk about this or this or that or that, or, here's 24 things that I could talk about. Just put me on stage and I'll knock it out of the park. I'll be awesome. And what the speakers talked about and entrepreneurs talk about is, when you define very specifically what your value proposition is and who you serve, then you get more and better business from that group of people than you get from all of your 24 things that you want to market to. Focus you and your messaging on the right audience and get the proper fit, and you'll be more successful. And so I talk about defining the role that you want. And the note that I wrote down was this: when you define the note that you want, it drives your strategy, it drives your brand messaging, it drives your networking, it determines how and when and what and where you will act and interact and react with people to find what you want. It is your target. And when you have your target defined, you can work towards that target, as opposed to not having a target and just wondering where you should aim, right? I know it's kind of hard for some of us to figure out. I mean, I have a lot of different things and interests that I could do, but in the job search mode, please define what your target is, define that niche, and then work aggressively towards that. Can you change it? Sure. Why not? Seth Godin has a book on it, Tipping Point. He talks about being in cul-de-sacs and needing, you get to the end of the cul-de-sac and you need to turn around, you need to pivot, you need to change, and that's okay. But please have a target that you're working towards. And then when it's time to pivot, you'll know. Okay, you'll know when it's time to pivot and make the pivot, and there's nothing wrong with that. I talk about, I walk you through a process of figuring out what you really want, including, what kind of work hours do I want? What kind of commute do I want? What kind of responsibilities do I want? All of these things become a part of this definition of your target so that you can really know what you're after, right? Like, you might find the perfect job that's 45 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes away. Is it still perfect? If you're commuting in 2.5 hours every day, maybe it's not perfect anymore, right? So within your own definition, you start to figure all these things out and really narrow down what your target companies are. Speaking of target companies, let me see. Nope, sorry. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. I have this awesome little thing on target companies. I talk about getting help with coaches and counselors and resume writers and stuff like that. I talk quite a bit about accountability. I probably mentioned accountability about a dozen times. And accountability can be on a piece of paper on your wall. It can be on an app on your phone. It can be with another person. It can be with a professional coach or something like that. But I feel strongly that you need to be accountable to somebody. I think that's really, really important. Talk about working with recruiters and some of the pitfalls and things to know. I talk about what the hidden job market is and how to get into it. The hidden job market, I'm going to tell you what right now, it's not this secretive magic bullet. It's an amazing thing, but you don't need to go buy a book on what is the hidden job market and how to get in. Because I'll tell you right now, it has to do with networking and branding. That's why a lot of the stuff that I talk about goes back to networking and branding. All right, so I'm going to jump over, not on the screen. Actually, I'll switch over to just me. In module 2, I talk about 3 systems, and I give you an overview of the 3 systems. So one is actually, I can't find it anymore. It's by a guy named Michael Webb, and he wrote this book called 6 Weeks to Multiple Job Offers. And it was the best job search program that I'd ever seen. It was a phenomenal program. I have a link in the slides that is to somebody's blog who talks about going through the program. And I need to go back and make sure the link still works and read it. I didn't do that this morning, but 6 Weeks to Multiple Job Offers had a lot to do. This is Michael Webb's a recruiter, has a lot to do with getting on the phone. Pick up the phone and talk to people constantly, continually. Like, don't be afraid of the phone. And I know that scares a lot of people. I'm not inclined to get on the phone all day long. I'd rather send emails all day long. But the idea is that you have a very strategic process so that by the end of a month and a half, you are having, as he says, multiple job offers. The second program is called the Accelerated Job Search Program. When I get out and speak in job clubs, I talk at a lot of churches, and I've been in all kinds of churches. There is an LDS church that has a program for job search, and they created a thing called the Accelerated Job Search Program, and it is on steroids. Like, it is crazy intense. There's a lot of daily goals that you have in front of you, and it has a lot to do with reaching out and having informational interviews. And there's a lot of accountability, and it's almost a full-time job at this point, which is great, because if you need to replace your income, why wait 10 to 12 months to replace your six-figure income? Why not just pack it all in the next few weeks and do high value activities in the next few weeks? The third system that I talked about was from my friend up in Canada, Dave Perry, who wrote the book on guerrilla marketing for job hunters. And it's an excellent book. I think I just read it's going to the 4th edition. That might be one of his other books, but he keeps it pretty updated. And I would definitely recommend his book, Dave Perry, and just look up Guerrilla Marketing Job Search. In the course, I interviewed him, and then I brought out 7 specific tactics or ideas that he shares to create your own system. And then what I do is I take bits and parts of different systems and put together the right things and the best things for my situation. That's how I cook, by the way. Like when I'm going to go make something, I'll print off like 5 or 7 recipes and I'll have them out on the counter. And then I just pick and choose different ingredients from each of the recipes and make my own thing. So then I talked about a business coach, Mark LeBlanc out of Minneapolis. Superb guy. He's been coaching entrepreneurs for a long time, has awesome systems and programs and coaching. And he actually inspired me to create what I call the job search program, which I'll show you here in a little bit. It's really based on the principles from Mark LeBlanc. I talk about in module 2 how I was not making much progress until I read the book Never Eat Alone. And I started going to network meetings, not to see what I could get out of the meetings, but how I could help others. That was my goal. That was my whole objective, to go to these network meetings. I was focused on how to, when I get in there, I'm going to listen at the 30-second pitches and listen to hear what people are saying and what they need, and think about my network and think about the introductions that I could make. And it was almost like a game. And that's all I did. I didn't go there to learn about job search, and I didn't go there to see who could help me. I went there just to help others. And the cool thing is, as I helped others, I started developing those relationships and nurturing those relationships. And then those people are like, hey, here's someone you should talk to. And it was reciprocated, and it was really cool. Talked about getting resume advice from people who are not resume writers. This is a massive downfall in your daily job search strategy. Be really careful, because you're going to have people, maybe even people who are in HR. The funny thing is, you might say, oh, you're in HR. Well, you look at my resume, and they're like, oh yeah, sure. I do that all the time because I'm in HR. And then if you find out what they do in HR, it has nothing to do with hiring, right? So be really careful who you send your resume to and what you do with their advice, because people will give you lots of advice, and a lot of the times it's not qualified advice. Okay, so when I started my job search, I started out implementing a strategy that was probably 10 or 15 years old. And if you asked me how to do a job search, I would have given you advice that was 10 or 15 years old. Whereas a resume writer that's active right now, they know how their last client got their job. They know how their last dozen clients got their job. They know how their last client in your industry or your field got their job. And they know things that you could or should do that's current, right? So be really careful. I'm not saying to not get advice from other people, but what you do with advice from Uncle Joe about your resume should be pretty different than what you're going to do with advice from someone who's a professional in the space right now. And like I said, I'm not going to disparage HR, but a lot of HR people aren't qualified to give you advice on their resume because they don't do anything that has to do with job search or hiring decisions. So be careful with that. I talked about what networking is and what it looks like. I talked about the statistic that I've seen that only 3% of jobs are found through job boards. 3%. It's ridiculous. a blog post that I read from Nick Corcadillos from asktheheadhunter.com. He loves talking about job board stuff. And I think the number, if I remember correctly, his number that he came down to was like 1.9% or 1.5% of jobs. So less than 3. 3 was already bad, you guys. Now we're in the ones. We're less than 2. Like, this is ridiculous. So there's a way to use job boards. There's absolutely a great way to use job boards, but it is not to do what I did for the first few weeks of my job search, or more than a month, where I sat and applied and applied and applied and applied and applied and hoped and hoped and hoped. And I was one of hundreds who had applied for the job, right? I talk about target companies and how you can use target companies as part of your search and part of your networking dialogue. And there's some cool stuff there. Okay, so the third module, I talk about the interview and the purpose of the interview. I talk about the best interview that I've ever seen, which was actually somebody at a conference who got up and did a kind of an impromptu presentation. The president of the organization was there. And all the details are in the course, which you can get for free. So the president was there, and this guy got up, wowed the crowd, wowed the president, and an hour or two later, I see them sitting in the hallway having a conversation. Next thing you know, the guy was hired at a pretty high level to basically run the whole department of what he was talking about on stage. And my point there is that we're always on stage. Like, we are always being watched. When I go out to eat, well, I don't go out to eat nowadays, but in the olden days when I could go out to eat, I would pay attention to the servers. And I would pay attention to the people behind the counter. When I go, to get my oil change and stuff like that, I pay attention, and I'm like, man, that person has great customer service. That person made me feel like $1 million. That person took ownership of a problem. That person, specifically a server at a restaurant, that person can handle a lot of spinning plates at the same time. Like, that's a skill that I want on my team. And that person smiles all the time. Like, they're pleasant to be around, right? So I talk about that. I talk about what Elon Musk said about interviewing, which was one of my favorite things that I ever found on YouTube. There's a video, you probably search it, Elon Musk interview, and he talks about how, he'll ask engineers questions about what they did. And, in an engineering environment, you might be working on a team. And what he really wanted to find out was, are you the person who figured out these very complex problems? Because I want to hire the person who understands and figures out the very complex problems, or were you just on the team? Like, and that's great, but he wanted like the brains behind the operation. And so he talks about how he draws that out, and he figures out whether you were just on the team or whether you really were the reason why the problem was figured out. Talk about using job descriptions. So I said that you can get value out of job boards, and one of the greatest things to do, I guess I bleed this over from module 2 to module 3, is to go into a job board and find like 5 to 10 postings for your title that you're looking for, and then put all those 5 to 10 side by side and start picking out words and phrases. And you can use those words and phrases to beef up your resume and get ready for interviews and put them in your cover letter and stuff like that. But it's a great way to make sure that you're up on the lingo. When I started my job search back in 2006, I had been so heads down on my job, I wasn't really sure what language I should have been using in interviews and stuff like that. And I felt uncomfortable with some of the language. I was comfortable with the language we used at our company and in our industry, but now that I was broadening where I was looking, I wanted to make sure that I could speak the language without walking into an interview and sounding like a doofus. And so going and using job descriptions can help you get ready to have those right conversations. I also talked about grabbing the job descriptions and putting them all into a word cloud app so that you don't have to do the analysis. You can put 10 different documents in, or all the text from 10 documents, and then get one big visual analysis out of it, which we actually have a tool like that in Jibber Jobber. Talked about the power of stories. And then I ended with making sure how you leave your employer, with notice and respectfully and stuff like that, and then creating a 90-day onboarding plan. So once again, this is an hour and a half. There's a lot of stuff in this course. The Designing a Killer Job Search Strategy on Pluralsight. Great course. You can have it for free during April 2020. If you're watching this past April 2020, just reach out to me and I'll see if I can get you a 30-day pass on Pluralsight. So let's jump over to these other 3 resources real quick. Jibber is, like I said, a CRM for job seekers. It replaces the job search spreadsheet. And the main thing that we're doing in Jibber is we're tracking and organizing our contacts, right? So this is kind of like our little black book where we're going to put in names and numbers and email addresses and stuff like that. When I met you, who introduced me to you, stuff like that. Our target companies. And I keep those separate because your contacts can move from company to company, right? And so let's say you're networking into a company through a contact and you lose that contact because they go somewhere else. You still want your company record in there and you still want to figure out how you're networking in. And then the jobs. And so keeping track of the jobs. Just yesterday, I was talking with somebody about the idea that you find a job online on Indeed or Monster Career Builder or whatever. And then like a month or 2 later, you go in for an interview, you go back online to look for the job description so you can be better prepared for the interview, and it's gone. And so in Jibber, we actually made a place where you can upload your job description so that even if it goes away from the job board, it's still there in Jibber. And with one click, we'll switch over to the word cloud and we'll do the word cloud analysis on that. The next one over, oh, I'm sorry. I thought I was showing my screen. All right, so we got contacts, companies, add a job up at the top here. Those are the 3 main things, and I call those the big 3 in Jibber. And then the 4th one is the log entries, and I want to have, what this does is it takes my little black book of contacts and contact numbers, and it puts context behind my contacts, right? So now I can know when we talked, what we talked about. Did I follow up with you? Well, what did I follow up with you? How did I follow up with you? And so the main things that we're doing in Jibber is we're tracking contacts, companies, and jobs. We're putting context behind them with log entries. And log entries can be from a phone call, from a face-to-face meeting, from email, whatever. And then we're creating follow-up through what we call either action items or reminders. So if I get on a phone call with you and I'm going to call you next Friday to follow up, that goes into my system. Now, it also goes onto my calendar, my Google Calendar, which is what I use. But when I put it into Jibber, I have the option to send myself a text and or an email reminder. And I am all about getting reminders, especially on very important follow-up that I want to make sure that I'm doing. So that's the main gist behind Jibber, and it basically is $60 for a year. Question I had yesterday, what happens after the year? Does it go away? No, you can still log in, you can still access, you can still create log entries to everything you've done. You'll probably be over the limits of how many contacts you can have. So you won't be able to add more, but you'll be able to always access what you put in the system, even if you don't upgrade again. So I will, I created this when I was in a job search, and I'm very sensitive to the job search or job seekers budget. That's Jibber. Happy to talk about it more. Just hit me up, jason@jibberjobber.com. The next thing that I created, I told you, was this 6-week job search program, which was based on Mark LeBlanc's business principles of how to grow a small business. And so there's some principles in here that I use to help you go from where I was, which was I was lonely in my job search. I really didn't have anybody else to help me or tap into or anything like that. I felt stuck. I was getting absolutely nowhere, even though I felt like I was doing things. I was in depression. I didn't know I was, and I don't feel like I'm a depressed person generally. But afterwards, I could look back on that time and be like, okay, that definitely was depression. And of course, I felt like I was spinning wheels. So I tell this story about where this came from And you can find that at jobsearchprogram.com. Now, here's what it looks like right now. We're going to change this and update it, and it's going to look a lot cooler in a while. But the main gist behind the program, there's 4 main boxes. You have your the day that you're on. So the first time you come in, you'll be on week 1, day 1, and it starts on a Monday. So if you enter on any other day, it's no big deal. You just eventually you'll get to the right day. But it's a 9-minute program for that Monday, and I teach you, I introduce you what the job search program is, and I talk to you about accountability, and I define what these high-value activities are over here. And so basically, as we go through the program, I am giving you 3 high-value activities to do every single day, okay? And as it goes through this dialogue, they'll pop up over here on the right-hand side. And so I have the transcripts, you can follow along, and then I have the 3 high-value activities, and then I talk about this idea of the PM question, which is, did I complete the 3 high-value activities? So this is that accountability that I was talking about, and I can come in and look at my report of all the yeses versus all the nos, right? And then down below, I call this Nick's box down here, because Nick Corcadillos from Ask the Headhunter said, hey, I want more. I want more ideas, because some of these, this is a 9-minute day, but some of these days are going to be like 2-minute days or less. And Nick said, I know you got a lot of stuff, Jason. Send me links. If I need to dig more, send me links so I can dig more into those. And so that's what the job search program is. This is a, right now it's on a special, but the list price is $497. Right now it's $197. So that'll probably change in the next year or so. Anyways, that's what I got. I created this job search program and Jibber Jobber based on the stuff that I talk about and the stuff I've learned, which are in the Designing a Killer Job Search Strategy program or course on pluralsight.com. I hope this is helpful. If you're not in a job search now, you might be in the next few months. And I know it's going to be a different kind of job search because everybody's going to be unemployed and nobody's going to be hiring. Supposedly, I'm seeing from coaches, I'm seeing their clients are still getting hired. But the principles that I talk about, principles will last through the ups and the downs. The principles of networking and branding and communicating and all of those things will always be important no matter where we're at in an economic cycle. So that's it for today. Tomorrow, we talk about how to onboard yourself. And it's a very proactive idea of how to make sure you have the best entrance into your new job. We'll talk